Morning, friends.
Morning, Ewan.
Please note that I use the word friends early in the day.
I thought we're cynical about that.
What was that, Maxine?
Oh, nothing. It's all right. Get back to the recording later. No.
I think you said I'm always cynical about that.
No, I didn't. I said not that we are cynical about that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Hey, talking about a highlight, I loved meeting your dogs yesterday, Ryan. They are absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I love showing them to you. Sorry about my son. He's he probably lacks more social graces than them.
It's all right. Diesel's a young man. I enjoyed at least having a brief chat with him. But the dogs were lovely. I really appreciated that.
Oh, cool. Good to take them out.
Yep.
Letty loves just being on the back of the wagon with her, driving at 100k with her face in the wind.
Yeah, dogs seem to love that, don't they? It's all a wonderful adventure.
So do kids.
Yeah.
Is that legal to put your kid on the back of a ute at 100 k's?
Not sure about it technically, but we
I
grew up.
like your backdrop today. Have you gone to the museum?
It is the museum, actually. It's the Contemporary Art Awards.
Wow.
If you pardon the echo.
Good. Am I up? Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Why can't you see me? Amy. Oh, hang on.
Have you turned your light on?
Or Amy.
I have. There you go. Now can you hear me and see me?
Yep.
Brilliant. Thank you. Sorry, it's a bit shady. It'll pass. All right. Good morning, everyone.
You might want to turn the lights in your office on.
Yeah.
Remember that power bill, though.
It's not very good in the morning. I seem to have a bit of a shaded face, and then by the afternoon, when the sun comes around, it's a bit better.
To you, and we didn't get an answer to that question yesterday because you were sort of asking about the building more than the pools and stuff, weren't you, yesterday, with the power? That's what I thought.
Okay, everyone.
Yes,
so,
it's supposed to be coming back.
We'll get started, shall we? Where is Julie? Oh, there she is. Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're on the council open agenda, and as I recall, we got through. I just printed myself a memo and left it on the printer. We got through until to what point?
So we had got through B1 and B2, and there was some information around the electricity that we were going to bring back this morning.
Yep.
So we do have Martin available for that.
Direct us to the page we need to be on. I'm still watching circles go around.
207 and 208.
Thank you. 207. It's not very fast up here on the 9th floor, our server. Okie doke. So kick us off, Julie. So what I think what the plan is, councillors, is to go through. We've been through 2A, 2B. We're going to talk about the power. We're going to go through the financial assumptions. We're going to go through the depreciations, right? And at that point, we'll go to PX and talk about inflation. And then we'll come back out and we'll talk about the list of projects in and outs and any adjustments. But we'll only be making holding decisions, if you like, and we won't be voting on anything until after the conversation on inflation. That's my understanding.
Yeah, Paula, Sean, Chair of Environment here. Sean is in the process of preparing some background to read the climate environment item yesterday, which I'm extremely concerned should that be cut. But anyway, we're getting some material for you to assist members.
Yeah.
Paula, Dave here. Look, if there's significant changes to the LTP, I want to raise issues about the whole LTP, not just about the inflation rate. There are some things like that we do need to look at, because the LTP, I want to remind people, was contextualized. Everything was in it together. So if we end up hacking into some small or isolated parts of it, that could affect other elements within that. So I'm sort of reserving the right to raise wider issues depending on what happens during the day.
Okay, and we'll keep in our mind then at that point the triggers for significance and so on. So we need to be guided by that, because if we start to make anything too, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, Dave. I'm just saying we just need to be aware of that.
But sometimes you can have death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
And no one thing is significant by itself, but cumulatively they could be.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. All right, Julie. Rob, hang on.
Yeah,
Rob,
sorry, can I just add to Dave's comments? I share his concern. The letters from Tompkins Wake have only focused on a potential rates increase and not on significant cost blowouts. So I'm a little bit concerned that, as Dave has said, the cumulative effect of cost changes might, on their own, trigger, without it being centred around a rates increase, could trigger a significant change. And that hasn't been covered by our legal advisors. So I don't know whether they will be available today, if needed, to advise us on what in the Local Government Act requires us to look at in the context of costs rather than just rates.
Through you, Chair, can I just answer that?
yes, please.
Yeah, so there's a second letter from Tompkins Wake which does address those issues that you've raised, Rob, and they've noted in that letter that they refer to our significance. Excuse me, our significance and engagement policy, which does pick up those factors that you've raised, and so they've advised that we need to assess things individually and cumulatively against our significance and engagement policy, and if those decisions meet the threshold of significance under that policy, which requires them to meet, I think four or five of the 9 kind of categories of significance, then it does trigger high significance. So yeah, that's in that second letter from Tompkins Wake, and what
Is that the letter dated the 10th of March, the one that is in PX at the moment?
I believe it's in the open.
Is it an open? Is it? But it's the one dated 10th of March, is it? There's an earlier letter dated in February, which
no, 16th of March.
Oh, okay, we haven't seen that letter then.
It's on page 261 of the diligent agenda.
Oh, okay, I've got one dated the 10th of March, which is the second letter from Tompkins Wake. But is there a third letter now?
I'm not sure which order they're in. I'm just looking at page 261 of the agenda. It's a letter dated 16th of March.
Okay, all right. I'll have a look at that then while we're talking. Thank you.
Yeah, listen.
And also, can I
just sort of toss in just a wee bit before Sean? Look, while I don't want us to get us way down the detail of what's significant and what's not. That's actually up to us. Because sure, we've got our policy and sure, we've got our legal advice about our rates and our costs and our 4 out of 9s, etc. But the bottom line is we're here to represent the citizens of the city, and things are changing all the time. So the significance is actually up to us anyway. We'll be guided by the policy, but it is up to us at any time to decide what's significant and what's not.
I agree to a point there, Mark. There is a trigger. There is something in the policy that covers significant projects, and it does include more than finances. So you're absolutely right if it was a public project of high public interest. But what I'm suggesting is that as we get into it with the comments that Dave made about a bigger change, we would have to seek advice and stop and think about that and talk about it. That's really where I'm heading with that one. Sean, carry on, please.
Yes, I was just going to also, just in response to Councillor Dave's comments, is just to say that the decisions that we make during the course of the day will be, again, sort of reiterating the point from yesterday, they don't back us into a corner. So we can make decisions in that PX item for the purposes of modelling or preparing the budget when we get to the end of the day and kind of confirm those decisions. I just want to be clear that that's when we're sort of making the decisions for the purposes of preparing the May budget. So the sort of the 1,000 cuts kind of stuff, we have the opportunity at the end of the day to see the cumulative effect of all of those decisions that we make during the course of the day before sort of making the decision to progress to the next stage.
All right, Ryan.
Thanks. Just so I understand the frame we're starting with, Sean, if we do nothing else but accept the status quo with recommendations, we don't breach our debt to revenue, but we push out the balancing to books for next year from 2 million deficit to 11 million. Is that right?
Who's answering that question?
Correct.
And when do we balance the books again? Is there a change in our actual balancing the books date forecasted?
It moves out by 1 year.
Okay, so that would be, what financial year would that be?
I'll just check that on the table for you.
25, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for those questions. I think we'll get into it now. So where do you want to start right now, Julie?
Maybe if we have Martin address the questions that were raised yesterday by the electricity. Martin is our energy consultant. So we've asked him to speak to give you an overview of where our electricity is going and what's driving that price increase. I'd like to hand over to Martin.
Thank you. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, elected members. So what's happened with electricity pricing is about a year ago, or probably a year and a half, there were issues in the electricity market around less gas reserves than expected. And they've been used to, we've used natural gas in the past to top up electricity generation when we haven't had enough hydropower. And around the end of 2020, the country got into a bit of a situation where there wasn't enough hydro and we couldn't get enough natural gas out of the gas fields, and we had to use a lot of coal at Huntly to basically maintain power. And as a result of that, prices went very high at that point, and there were actually a lot of companies that came out of their contracts, and they were shocked to find that their energy costs doubled when they went back out to the market. So since then, a number of those issues have been resolved, but basically the market participants now assess that there is a lot more risk in the market that wasn't previously identified. And so prices have stabilized, but they have stabilized at a higher rate. And it's roughly, compared to when we first set this contract up about 3.5 years ago, we're now looking on the energy component, what we've been told by all of government and also by our existing suppliers and pricing that I've seen, indicative pricing, we're sort of looking at a 50% increase in the energy component. So in terms of how this budget has been set up, we have 450 electricity connections, and we have a lot of detail about those connections, and we've gone through and for each connection mapped out what the impact is on that increased rate. Also looked at potential changes in network charges, and that has helped. That has basically given us the picture of where we are with increased electricity. But I think on top of that, there's also some sort of structural changes in how we deliver energy to our sites, which has also impacted on the amount of electricity that we need. So I'll give you an example. At the wastewater treatment plant, we were using a gas engine to minimize peak demand, and that was also generating electricity. So we're not doing that now, but we now have to supply, an additional 860,000 kilowatt hours of electricity from the grid, which we weren't doing before. So if you like, what we're using gas for, we're now using electricity from the grid. So we've had to swap that over to the electricity side. we've also got general growth in water treatment, with more reservoirs coming online and just general increase in water usage. Street lighting as well. So even though we've done the LED upgrade and we've minimized all our electricity usage, we have got obviously more suburbs being developed, and so that means more load. We are looking to replace gas boilers or offset them with electricity heat pumps at Waterworld in the next financial year. So that will add 1 million kilowatt hours in electricity in doing that. And there's a couple of other items as well. So, you know, just there's also, as well as the electricity rates, there is also the transfer across to using more electricity, which has also added additional cost as well. I see there's a question from Councillor McPherson. Do you want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I asked yesterday, Martin, wasn't really what you're talking about. That's all good detailed information to back up the why the extra's needed. I was asking, what have we done, or what are we doing now to look at alternative generation sources, given that the price and volume that you're describing to us, given those increases, that would change the nature of a business plan as to whether it was worth, for instance, putting in solar PV cells, a windmill on the roof, switching more to gas. I'm interested, we're switching away from gas. Is the gas no longer being produced by that site? Because as far as I knew, the flare was still working there at Horatu. So it's not the usage, it's how we generate what we use.
So, so it's a question towards efficiency and different methods of
and I'm not expecting that maybe a short term, there's obviously transition period to anything. You don't suddenly on the 1st of July put in thousands of solar cells, but you know, it is that business case being re-looked at, and so that we get a change going down the track.
Yeah, so the other thing that's happened, I guess, I'll just answer around natural gas first. Natural gas has actually gone up 150%. So that is one reason why we aren't using natural gas, because it's even more expensive than what it has been before, as well as the carbon emissions, of course. And we're trying to reduce those, and natural gas is a big contributor in greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of, I guess, look, medium term, right now we are seeing some headwinds in electricity pricing, and part of that is actually there's been a little shortage of new generation, but that is coming online in the next year or two, and sort of hanging over everything is Tiwai Point. And, you know, that currently Manapuri supplies, I think it's 14% of, can produce 40% of New Zealand's current electricity generation. So when that comes available in 2024, what we're seeing in the long-term electricity forecast is quite a step down in electricity pricing. So this is probably
except that Comelco, or whatever they're called now, are talking about staying there, the most recent stuff I've seen. So that would be difficult to count on that suddenly being available if they do stay, wouldn't it?
Look, there's always that uncertainty, but that's just where we're seeing at the moment in terms of pricing, that in that 4th year, it's coming back quite a lot. So that's what the market is sort of thinking, I guess, that generation is going to be available. I can also answer around solar a little bit. We have been investigating the opportunities for solar, and what we're finding is that there is potential financial cost effectiveness for solar in our smaller sites where we have quite a high tariff rate, and we can see that we can get quite a good payback under 10 years. And the other opportunity is if we can put in a very large solar array where you get the economies of scale and you have a big load next to it, then yes, that's also quite good as well. But it requires significant, we're talking millions of dollars of funding to put that size array in.
What about the companies? There's at least one that I've looked at myself that are looking at supplying everything up front and giving you a fixed price, and with their payback obviously over, I think it was 10, 15 years or something like that, but both a win-win on both sides over that period.
Yeah, look, I'm not aware that we've gone into detail, but certainly there are possibilities of partnering with other companies to deliver those sorts of that sort of generation. Yep.
Martin,
I think
through the chair, so if I can, on the 7th of December, there was a general manager's report that identified solar arrays and how we were going to approach that and come back through the Infrastructure Operations Committee. So in terms of exactly what you're just talking about, Councillor McPherson, so bringing back the opportunities, talking to partnership models and how we can actually introduce those into council facilities to offset the uptake and increase in electricity costs, and taking on the opportunity. And I believe we had a conversation particularly about the Transport Rejuvenation Centre rejuvenation as to the opportunity for solar arrays there. So there are conversations happening. We haven't brought them to council yet because they're coming in future committees, because the first cab off the rank was the EV charging stations in the February meeting. So solar arrays are definitely being discussed at a staff level to bring back to elected members.
Okay, so I think we need to move this on because it's going to take half an hour on this. But I guess, Dave, you've explored your questions about efficiency, new methods, and making sure we got the best deal in the market, which is, and Eva-Lisa, would you say that where we are right now with this plan represents the best we can achieve, the best advice we've got over the cost of electricity?
Well, okay, Paula, sorry, I've been sort of shut out of any discussion there. We can do that, that's fine, but I don't actually agree it's the best deal. I agree this is probably not the time and place to debate it. We don't have the energy efficiency campaign.
I agree, but we're into debate, Dave.
That are visible now like they used to be. So that's where I'm starting from, actually.
Yeah, no, I get you. I just want to keep to the questions because I think you've got some points to debate there. That's all. Because otherwise we'll spend 40 minutes on one item of the whole day.
But I don't have any information that will help me say we should cut the costs here or add them there in the energy area. It's all general policy theory.
Okay, thank you. Well, Eva-Lisa kind of talked about that coming to, I think that's what you said, Eva-Lisa, that it was coming through the infrastructure committee as well, in terms of...
In time to get in the annual plan, if any of it's short term.
Can we bring some of that back in May, if necessary?
The solar array opportunities, there wouldn't be any decisions in terms of what Councillor Dave's asking for. So just to be upfront and honest, by May, no.
Okay. All right, Dave. You live to debate that one and talk about it later. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. Hey, look, just speaking of more information, a question that Councillor Ewan asked yesterday, which I thought was a really good one, Martin, that we didn't have our hands on at that time, was the effect of our electricity use, or how much electricity have we saved by not having people in the building. Now, Helen came in with a really good answer about pools and facilities, but I was more interested myself in finding out, with most people working at home, how has that affected our power consumption, and is that something we're factoring into our next year, maybe two, in the building? Because I kind of figured that, if you haven't got 800 people in a building, you're not going to have as many plugs plugged in.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and we definitely have noticed a drop in electricity consumption in the municipal offices. So we haven't got 400 people in there, so that's a lot of heat load reduced out of the building. Just so we've got, so we spend about, I'll just sort of put this in perspective. We spend about 34 million kilowatt hours on electricity, or use 34 million kilowatt hours on electricity a year, and our top 12 sites use 86% of that. And of those top 12 sites, wastewater, water treatment plant, and street lights use 75% of that.
Wow.
So those are the key sites in terms of, you know, when we're preparing this budget. And I think the other thing is that we've tried to use FY21 electricity usage, which was more a normal year where we didn't have lockdowns and things, because we're looking for FY23 and thinking about things are going to open up, and so we need to make sure we have enough budget to cover ourselves off.
Yep.
But yeah, certainly there have been savings across the board in, you know, our larger facilities because of COVID. Yep.
Okay, but you're saying it's not a significant amount when you look at the other sites.
It's not material against our water
Right.
treatment, wastewater, and street lights. Yep.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. That's the answer I was looking for. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Bunting. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I was just, so Dave had asked the question that I was going to ask around the electricity and the use, and I guess I won't go much further right now, but I think it could be valuable if we actually had some kind of motion come out of today to give further direction on that, because my understanding in a past Environment Committee meeting, we had actually resolved to ask for more information on site electricity generation and things, and that was to come back, and really that information hasn't come back that we were expecting. It was supposed to be in February, so I think we need to pick that up again.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ewan.
Sorry, Your Worship, it took me a while to take myself off mute. Look, Mark very kindly asked the question that I was trying to follow up from yesterday, Martin, which was, okay, so you're asking for a significant increase, and I think I heard you say that you're facing a 50% increase in costs. But at the same time, in theory, we should have saved some in regards to usage, but I didn't quite hear if you've actually got any solid information around that. What are the actual numbers?
If you're talking about savings in usage from the effect of COVID, we can't, consider that they'll still be there going forward when we resume normal activities.
Well, with all due respect, part of the narrative I've heard from the senior leadership team is following on from this work-life balance mix, where some will continue to work from home, and it's been part of the overall strategic discussion. So I'm assuming management, when turning their minds to getting that balance, that they will still be encouraging a number of people to work from home if they can. Because I thought there'd been some potential options for doing some other things with the building. So has that not been added to your electricity equation?
Yes, it has, because I used data that came from the year where we were working from home. So, there was work from home in FY21. But if we're just talking about the municipal offices, it actually sits outside our top 12 sites in terms of usage. So what has been going on there is that you would have seen there's been lighting upgrades to LED, and also at the moment we're just replacing the existing heating and ventilation system with a new one, and we're seeing some quite good savings coming through from that as well. So yes, there are savings there, but just in the scheme of the overall budget, they're quite small.
Right. All right. So to remove any doubt, what you're still saying is you want the significant increase. And finally, why are you now asking for this less than 9 months since we did the LTP?
So these figures were well, when we did the LTP, of course, this change hadn't happened. I mean, as I said, it was sort of to the end of the beginning of 21. So this information was put forward, I think it was in November, and it is. we're trying to be realistic here as to what it is, but we're certainly going to be monitoring the situation, and we hope that it will come back less than this. But this is where it is now at the moment. It has been quite a fast changing situation where we've gone from what has been very steady pricing for a number of years to a really sharp increase. I mean, typically we wouldn't expect more than 5%.
All right, thank you. My final question, if I could, to someone in accounts. Paying electricity, is that an OPEX?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Right. And in terms of if you were to measure an inflationary percentage increase from, say, last year to now, what you're recommending to these price increases, what sort of percentage is that?
So as I mentioned yesterday, Councillor Ewan, this is a 24% increase specifically on electricity alone.
Thank you. So in light of that, I'm looking forward to you, Tracy, explaining why you're still recommending an inflationary rate of 2.9 in operational expenditure.
We'll get to that later, Councillor Wilson, as you know. Thank you.
Hey, Paula, can I just add something just in terms of the point that Councillor Sarah raised? So there was, through the climate action report to the February Environment Committee, we did add some report on some options to reduce emissions from council's energy use, and we did sort of note in that report that the sort of 5-month period from July 21 to November 21 compared to the same period the year before, July to November 2020, electricity use reduced by 4.4%. So largely as a result of COVID, but there are other contributors as well. And so the largest savings noted in that report were the wastewater treatment plant due to new efficient air blowers, the Claudians Event Centre due to impact of COVID-19 restrictions, street lights due to LED upgrades, Waterworld due to the impacts of COVID-19 restrictions, and municipal building due to the change in air conditioning system and the impact of COVID-19 restrictions. So there has been information through the Environment Committee to respond to that previous resolution.
Okay, I think we're going to. I'll take Mark's
one
question.
Little question. Thank you. It's regards the LED. I forgot to ask this earlier on. I remember last term when Sean, you'll remember when we got that great deal to do the LED lighting quite quickly and suddenly, and the savings were predicted to be pretty good. How far through our LED program are we? Probably for you, Martin. Like, are all our streetlights LED now, and are we realising those savings that we were expecting?
I believe it's almost. I think we're actually all the way through that. I can provide an update. Yeah, thanks, Robin.
Martin. Good morning, councillors. So we've got through doing all of the replacement of the standard type units. We still have some work to do where we're replacing what's been described as decorative or non-standard. So that's in those subdivisions where they've used the pretty street columns. So we've still got some work to do in there, but we've got a large percentage of the network completed. I think the big issue here is that the power usage has reduced, but perhaps the availability charges have overtaken any savings in that area.
Oh, so we're not. Martin. So once they're replaced, though, we should recognise those savings because they're meant to last a whole lot longer, aren't they?
Well, I guess that was made on the assumption of power prices at that time and availability charges. So that's the difficulty we have, and that's where Martin does his work.
Yes, so I can confirm those savings were already incorporated into the LTP budgets when the decision made to put the LED lighting in. They were already factored in. And so now we're just seeing the offsets that Martin is talking about.
So was it the right thing to do?
Yes.
Okay. All right. No, that's
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thanks for your questions on this item. we need to move forward. So, Julie, and there will be debate, of course, at some point. Julie.
Thank you. Now, we are suggesting that we move to page 209, where we talk about the free changes to assumptions, depreciation, our COVID-19 assumption, and incorporating the update of the population and dwelling forecast. Maybe if we could ask Tracy just to quickly outline what's driving the change in the depreciation assumption. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So just with regards to depreciation, there's just a few things that we've got happening at the moment. So we're currently revaluing quite a large proportion of our assets. So that work should be done by the end of April. So I am anticipating that this number will potentially change when we bring this back to the main meeting, depending on what the result from those revaluations are. And as you also know, and you'll remember that I talked about this all through the LTP, and the depreciation number is very much relying on whatever are the outcomes of today and the decisions that are made today. So it becomes a bit of a cycle in the sense that if we're pulling or pushing capital projects, that has an instant effect on not only depreciation, but you also remember it has an effect on our interest amount as well. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Just to make sure I'm on the right page, we are now going into the discussion about, we've gone into PX, right? So we're
No. We're doing the depreciation first, then we're going into PX.
So it's paragraph 24 in your open paper.
Page 209.
For my interruption. Sorry, in which case I don't have a question. My good learned colleague, Councillor Rob, does though.
Thanks. Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Tracy. Look, I often see this depreciation adjustment that we have to do on a very regular basis as sometimes being an elephant in the room. You know, one of the points that you haven't made in your presentation, of course, is that an increase in this case of about $6 million a year goes straight to our bottom line and affects our balancing the books. Is there anything that we can do to try and get a bit more accuracy around the surprises that typically arise from these revaluation adjustments? You know, the first part of that question is, do we have to depreciate on revaluations, or can we go back to cost, which is what a lot of businesses do anyway? And are there, I mean, every council must be facing the same issue. Are there things that we can do differently to try and get a bit more accuracy around our predictions? So sorry, there's kind of two separate questions.
Lots of questions. Okay, so I'll try and pick them apart. So one is you don't have to rate, if you like, all of your depreciation if you choose not to as part of your LTP. You'd have to do that as part of your financial strategy right at the start when we're doing LTP. So you can choose not to do a portion if you wanted of that. The risk you run with that, as you'll know, Councillor Rob, what the depreciation essentially pays for is the maintenance on those assets. So Hamilton City Council has $5.5 billion worth of assets that we own and look after and have to maintain. So essentially that's what depreciation is doing. And if I remember a few years ago when I first started, when the OAG themselves did a piece of work around how much money we were bringing in depreciation and what our renewals and compliance budget was and what we were spending. And they should actually match. And what we've been trying to do, and especially what you did in the last two LTPs, is try and bring that back and match those two things together. So the money we're pulling in from depreciation is essentially paying for your renewals and compliance budget, as well as maintenance, as well as consequential OPEX and those sorts of things as well. So that's kind of why we do that piece of work. As far as revaluations are concerned, yes, there has been a few surprises, and we obviously try and model as best as we can with the information that we have at the time. So that is and has been very difficult, and you'll know that a lot of the number that we're bringing to you for the annual plan is the hit that we've just taken from our buildings revaluation that we just did last year, that we're also seeing in this year's accounts. So that's nearly $4 million worth just on the value of our buildings alone in Hamilton. And as you also know, that obviously has gone from one extreme to the other in a very short period of time. And then the other thing, obviously, the increase in depreciation is genuinely, we've also in the last couple of years doubled our capital program. So if you're doubling your capital program, you're essentially doubling your depreciation rates at the same time.
So the advice you're giving us now is that it is financially prudent that we should be making sure our depreciation claims, what we're actually rating for in depreciation, is following the line that you're doing to ensure that we've got sufficient cash funds coming in from the rating of depreciation to maintain our assets.
Very much so, yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. I heard almost none of Tracy's answers then. It's a huge echo coming from your microphone, I'm afraid. So I'm maybe asking points that you've already covered to do with the depreciation. And I'm not sure I'll hear your answers now either, Tracy. It's even worse than yesterday, I think. I'm sorry, but it's just the echo. Look, a few years ago, I believe it was 9 years ago, it may have been 6 at the similar time in the annual plan, we did adjust the depreciation so that we didn't rate for everything that we could have rated for now. And it sort of goes to Rob's question. I'm sort of wondering whether the earth fell in, whether the sun rose the next day, whether we were able to maintain our kit even with, and I think it was something close to 10 or just under $10 million we took out of that picture, so that we rated for a portion of it, but not all of it, all of the depreciation. I don't know, I'm not even sure whether you were there, Tracy, but it's one of the problems with institutional knowledge in this place, I suppose. But that was an important point because it wasn't necessary. We showed at that time, I believe, and I want to check this with staff somewhere, it wasn't necessary to rate for every single bit of assessed depreciation, that some of it could be done on costs, and there were other ways to handle the maintenance and upgrade sort of programs that led to. So I want to sort of tease that out a bit more, because it seems to me that rating for everything possible is possibly just as unwise as rating for nothing.
Yeah, so sorry you didn't hear me before, Councillor Dave. So what I did just explain is that there is a clear with what we do in depreciation and pulling that in and paying for our renewals and compliance budget. So that's the link. And as you'll say, and Paul Gower over the years when he's presented to you in that renewal space has showed you the effect of when we haven't been able to match those two things together.
Sorry, I honestly didn't hear most of that.
That's okay. Yes, Tracy, I must admit your sound is not good today. If you are able to do anything about that, a headset or something, I'm not sure. Thank you.
I think the key, so if I can just help Tracy out, the key point was that if we don't depreciate at the rate that we believe we need to, so that we can renew our assets, we get into strife in our ability to maintain our assets going forward because we can't afford it.
But that was that was exactly the argument I'm referring to. That was said 9 years ago, David, and we agreed to basically take a higher risk by not putting everything in there. And I'm not aware, I've never seen a report from staff that we underrated there and that we weren't able to maintain our assets from that exercise that we did. So,
no, I know, but when we, you're right, Councillor Dave, when we did have the conversation in developing the 2018-28 long-term plan, if you remember, we had that financial strategy task force looking at guiding principles, and we talked about how it was key to us to maintain and look after the assets that we have. So through that conversation, and also accompanied by conversations where Paul Gower had presented condition assessment type overview of our asset management planning, if you like. There was a culmination of the point that we weren't actually reinvesting and maintaining our assets as well as we needed to. And what we're actually doing is deferring into future years a significant cost to actually, rather than maintaining on a regular maintenance program or time frame, we were deferring the need for they were more chunky sort of upgrades that we would have to do. So you are right that it is a risk-based discussion, but the nub of the issue is that if we rate for less, we're deferring the payment of a problem into future years.
Well, do we have the matching work program that actually shows us that we need every cent of this now, or might it be better to chunk it down, which Rob was talking about, actual costs, as they come up, and some of them might fall in better years than an even spread, if you like, which is what the depreciation program gives you.
Well, one of the things, it's a good question. One of the things that we've done or put a significant amount of effort into over the last 3-4 years is actually our asset condition assessments, because in the past they weren't as good as they needed to be. And so in doing that, we've understood more. So rather than just painting a building because it says on the schedule to paint the building, or to fix something because it's on the schedule to do that, we've put a lot of energy in understanding our assets in a lot more detail, and therefore we've been able to rejig our maintenance program to just fix when needing to fix, or replace when needing to replace. So our asset management maturity has improved significantly over the last 6 years, and so we believe that when we have a look at the asset data that drives depreciation, we believe that asset data is significantly better and giving us the right signals. In the past, we probably didn't have as good asset data, and therefore we're more driven by the theory rather than practice, if I can say it like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But the one related extra question I've got is, why in an annual plan year are we revisiting this when we only, as I think Ewan used the term, did it 9 months ago, 12 months ago? In effect, we sort of set this, we had just as good an asset management plans in place then. Why has it suddenly jumped in an annual plan round? Aren't you sort of entitled to rely on some surety for at least 3 years?
Yeah, absolutely. The point that Tracy was making is that a lot of our revaluations relate to buildings, and it's been significant, well over what we had expected, the increase in value of those buildings. And
but those are paper values, are they not? Are they, what's the, I appreciate the market value of buildings has gone up a lot, but it's not necessarily the replacement value, which is what we're really needing to know.
Well, the cost of materials and maintaining the building goes up alongside that in terms of the cost of replacement, and that's why we capture those new valuation topics. They're not, in our minds, not theoretical. They're actually the cost of what we know now would be the cost of running a maintenance program.
If our building values went up by 50% in a 3-year period, which is something like what they did, I think, are we saying that the cost of maintenance and upgrades would go up by 50% because the building construction cost index hasn't gone up by that much?
No, that's right. And that's where I come back to the asset data and making sure that the underlying asset data is correct and matches. So honestly, this is a devil's in the detail. If your asset data in any council, if your asset data is in trouble, then you're pretty much in trouble in lining this all up. And that's why when we think about council, significant, as Tracy mentioned, we have over $5 billion worth of assets. We need to be excellent at our asset management to understand the costs coming through to OPEX.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question, Paula, in this area is how much of this depreciation relates to Three Waters infrastructure, which we're going to have taken off our hands in the next short while, and therefore we don't care about in that sense longer, past the next year maybe.
Yeah, I don't have that specific number, but we can get that for you. But there'd be a lot of costs.
That may be important in terms of our future rating.
100%. Yes, 100%. And as we work through the Three Waters, we'll be able to give a lot more clarity around what that looks like, because there's a number of topics, right, associated with that in terms of how we support our water assets and the debt associated with those water assets.
So the depreciation for the Puketi poo plant will be not irrelevant as soon as that happens.
That's right.
Yeah,
it'll be relevant to whatever entity pays a princely sum for
it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Look, some really good questions coming through there from Rob and Dave. I just wanted to follow tact in terms of just an understanding. So we've got circa $11 million balancing the books deficit, and 6 million of that is from depreciation. Is that right?
It's a really good point, because when we do talk about escalating costs in terms of what's driving that, the difference between the 2 and the 11 is 9, of course, and 6 of that, 2/3 of that is depreciation.
Okay, so with that, would it be fair to say that this depreciation model, notwithstanding all the the good information you and Tracy have shared, is fairly gold-plated?
No, nothing's gold-plated in local government. It's really what we think we need to be able to maintain the assets to continue.
But it's your best practice. You put forward best practice in terms of what you recommend here.
I would have to say that we are better than we used to be around asset data, but we're not where we need to be, and it's a journey. Sorry to bring out John Mitchell.
Given that this is a significant piece of the whole conversation, I guess following on from Dave, I wonder if, because we need the visibility to make an informed decision. So with the 6 million of depreciation, could we have a breakdown if staff had to say, look, if we had to make some adjustments here, maybe Three Waters is 2 or 3 million of that we could leave out. Maybe there's some other assets that we could either leave out or have a scaled down depreciation rate, so that we can, if we find that we've made a contextual error, we've got the future LTP to rebalance that, given the context of the environment we're in.
That detail exists, so we could grab categorized depreciation per asset type and share that with you.
So I guess my question there, Paula, is a request of staff. Could we have some options around this depreciation rather than the sort of all or nothing approach? Could we have a tiered approach, e.g. 3 waters in, 3 waters out, maybe a variation on the depreciation rate, and also...
Yeah. So, David, you said you could do some rough order, something on that. Of course, we got to May to get it completely transparent, but can you do some work on that to give us some information?
I'll have a chat to Tracy offline.
Okay. So,
David, can you also, sorry, Paula, can you just also check any issues that might arise with Audit New Zealand on the annual plan?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Some clarity on that sooner rather than later. I know it may need some more detailed work, but at least we can have it in front of us for some assumptions would be good.
Yeah, just some options. I think you get the intent of my question, Dave, whether we might be able to...
Yeah, I do. Yep.
I'm not trying to be cute. I'm trying to be legitimate around this depreciation, but it is 2/3 of what we could spend 2 days arguing about.
Yeah, and it's not insignificant part of what we're dealing with. That's why these questions are so important, that everybody understands and is happy with what we're doing, isn't it? So good questions. Thanks, everyone. Maxine.
Look, thanks, Ryan and David, for your questions. Excellent drilling down into this. Tracy mentioned the doubling of our capital program and the need to, from day one, take into account the depreciation on those assets. How critical is that? And I guess that goes to the questions that that Dave was trying to explore as well. Is how absolutely essential is that to happen?
Well, as soon as an asset is being used, you need to depreciate it per accounting standards. So roads may be 100 years, so the actual impact of that might be minimal, but it's cumulative. And Tracy is exactly right. The number of assets, our capital program has grown exponentially over the last 3 or 4 years, and so that will impact depreciation. Yeah. Sorry, okay. Tracy, you came on. Did you want to say something? How's your mic going?
No, it's fine. Thank you. You answered
it. Sorry, am I doing okay?
Yeah, you're doing fine. You're doing great. Thanks.
So I guess, Tracy, are you working from home today? Is that the issue?
Yeah, I am. Someone's just going to bring me a microphone, but I'm also losing my voice as well, which never helps. So.
Okay. Well, we'll try and get through it as best we can, but you do sound like you're in a paper bag, just so you know.
He's in the middle of the river. What do you expect? The acoustics are
yeah, floating around in the river. Maxine, carry on. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So I guess the breakdown that you'll bring to us might be helpful for us to be able to visualize how different parts. I can acknowledge that roads are a little bit different, perhaps, to buildings or plant. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, has everybody had their questions? Well, not necessarily satisfied, but clearly understood on this matter. Yeah. Okay, then we'll go on to the next bit. Thanks, Julie.
Sorry, Paula. Just in terms of the clarification regarding Ryan's request for some options paper. When would that be coming, or is this something that's not going to happen today? So we're going to sort of look at it right at the end of the piece. I don't mind, just so I know.
Good question. I understood, David, you were going to have an offline conversation, bring but information back to us today.
Well, I can easily give a breakdown of the different categories of depreciation, but for Ryan is asking for a pragmatic review of what could we do in that space, and it's going to take, given that we're on the call today and contributing in other facets of it, it would be it'll take a bit more work than today to have a decent go at it. So we would definitely bring it back to elected members prior to the report coming through.
But that wouldn't be in the draft that we send out then, is what you're saying, David?
That's right. I mean, like we also need to contact Audit New Zealand and make sure that any sort of, if we were to not follow, if we were to make these estimates on some different categories of assets, how would that go for them? So as in, would they be supportive of that? So like any there's complexities around the water topic that's been asked, that question, and we just need to make sure we give you the right advice rather than off the hoof.
But it wouldn't necessarily be them giving the best advice, in my experience, because at least sequestering the Three Waters component, putting it on one side, showing it, but showing it as a separate element, that would seem to be wise from anyone's point of view, because a Three Water entity B would like to know that information, I'd imagine.
And I'm sure we've got that information in the bowels of all the Three Water stuff that we've been sharing. So it's just making sure that everyone's happy with our approach, that's all.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Excellent, Julie. Thank you, Julie.
So on page 209, we have two other assumptions, and this is opportunity for any questions on those. One is just talking about a COVID-19 assumption that we applied, which is basically a new normal from July onwards. And the second is just a recognition that we need to, in our long-term plan, you directed staff to incorporate the updated population forecasts into this annual plan, and we just need to recognise that we have done that. Are there any questions on those items?
Bound to be. Are there any questions, or is that pretty straightforward? Okay, it seems pretty straightforward, Julie.
Great. And then, so I'd like to move on to our capital deferrals. This is the last thing we'll talk about before we move to public excluded. And so this is now on page 210.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that we've talked about our capital program for the upcoming year is 316, and staff have been working on the deferrals. Sean, were you going to talk to this for us?
Yeah, I'll just to kind of help sort of frame it up. So I think table 5 is probably the easiest thing to look at. So table 5, that just kind of shows how we've arrived at what's recommended in the report. So the starting point is for 22-23, that's the annual plan year, is 316.31. So that was what was in year 2 of the LTP, and then the rest of the table kind of outlines what adjustments have been made to that. So there's some approved changes that have come through the Finance Committee, 0.67, and then the so the 0.67 and the 18.23. So those are changes which have been reflected through the Finance Committee to this point. Then the next one down is a 63.2. So that is the deferrals which are coming out of this year and into next year, so the annual plan year. And there's more detail of what that is in table 6. And then the next figure, which goes on to the over the page, is 19.62 million. So they are the known deferrals out of next year, the annual plan year, into the following year. So also really important to note that 19.6, that's just the known projects at this stage. So there is a comment in the report that staff are going to continue to review the capital program to identify additional deferrals, timing changes, and that will come through. So an updated deferrals list will come through the council meeting on the 25th of May. And so then that kind of lands us at that bottom figure, which is 377.45. So that's the reforecast capital program. That's the sum of all the capital projects which are planned for next year. So that is essentially what is recommended in the report, is that we approve those changes and that capital program of 377, but again, that will be updated prior to May. So Tracy and Chris and others are also kind of obviously available to help answer kind of some of the specific questions on how that works.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bunting?
Thank you. Hey, look, thanks, Sean. Look, I understood that crystal clear, but there may be others in the group, like, Rob and that, who might be too embarrassed to ask. So can you please re-explain I'm saying that tongue in cheek, Rob, table 5 on 28, point 28. I just started to sort of slide off the toast there when we started talking about deferrals out, and then I saw the negative 90.6 and then the negative 20 in the next one. So can you just slowly explain that again, please?
Sure. So on page 210, so the deferrals out of 2021-22, that's this year, to 22-23 and 23-24, so that's years 2 and 3 of the LTP. So it's got negative 90.6 in the 21-22 year, so that's the year we are currently in. So 63 of that is going into next year, the annual plan year, and 27 is going into the 23-24 year. Okay. So that's deferrals from this year to over the next 2 years.
I see. Okay, you're getting that now. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Did you get there, Rob? Yep. Good. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for being so helpful, Councillor Bunting.
Well, I'd like to think of everybody. Yeah.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes, I want to start by congratulating Councillor Bunty for asking the financial question. Well done, Bunty. You've come a long way. Look, Sean, we used a term in the discussion before, known deferrals. So I just want to clarify what that includes and doesn't include. I'm taking what we're seeing here as deferrals that we've already been informed about, gone through committees, been identified as which projects and all that sort of thing. But there may, when you say known, implying that there are going to be perhaps, probably, certainly some future deferrals we don't know about yet. We don't know the quantums, but there will be some in the next 12 months, which will then get added onto the next annual plan, presumably.
Yeah, inevitably. So in terms of those known projects, so the table 7 on page 213, that shows what makes up that 19.62. So there's sort of 10 or so sort of projects which we know now will be deferred, or timing changes from next year to future years. But yeah, so there will also be, between now and May, Chris and the team are looking at what else might be added to that list. So going into this annual plan, that we'll have some more that is known on that list. But as you say, things happen during the course of the year, so that's where we use the finance committees during the course of the year, that other things as they come up for a range of reasons, timing needs to be sort of shifted out to future years. So there will be naturally more deferrals, timing changes, etc., that happen sort of on an ongoing basis.
But even over the next 2 months, there's going to be some additions you're anticipating to that from Chris's team's work. So there'll be a higher total deferral figure out of this year to next year.
Yeah, and so there will be and Tracy might correct me on this point, but in terms of some of those specific projects, yes, there will be. No, actually, yeah, there will be changes between what you're seeing now and what comes through in May.
So that's going
to.
Yeah,
that's probably the short answer.
Sort of improve, if I can put it crassly, the debt to revenue ratio in the short term, but maybe make it worse medium term to long term, and then even up long term, sort of thing.
Yeah, assuming that list gets longer and things get added to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor Paula. Sean, let me just make sure I've got this clear. In the 2021-22 year, we said we were going to do $328,000 worth of capital projects. Is that correct?
328.67, that's the number you're referring to, I think.
Yep. Perfect. And we rated on that basis. We went out and we said, this is what we're going to do. Our entire plan was on that basis.
Yes, that was part of the LTP. Yep.
Cool. And then now what we're saying is actually, hey, look, we're not going to be able to do that. And we're having to defer 90.6 million to the 22-23 year.
In effect, yeah.
Okay. And in the 22-23 year, we're already saying, oh, and by the way, in the last trading year, we've spent $18.23 million more than we thought we would. And that's already been managed through Rob's finance committee during the time. And that's why we have to put that 18.3 million into the 22-23 year. Have I understood that correct?
Sean, Chris here, can I pick up on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to go back just one step, Councillor Wilson, just to your last question. So we start off the LTP with 228, and we add the deferrals from the previous year of 51. So when you look at the approved changes and additions to the capital program, some of that is driven by water stimulus funding. So it's not cost increases, it's our program's got bigger because we've taken on water stimulus. So when we come to the deferrals out of this year, 21-22, you can see the figure of $90.6 million there. So that's the figure that we've been advising through Finance Committee that we expect $90 million of deferrals. This table is indicating, because of some of the impacts of Omicron and the industry, that we might have the next line down another 20 million of deferrals. So out of 21-22, we can expect $110 million of deferrals. Tracy can jump in terms of the rating for that. There's always an assumption made about deferrals in terms of what we rate for. So we don't rate for that full 110. There's an allowance made, and Tracy, you might want to clarify that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So, Councillor Ewan, what we've always done, since I've been in this role anyway, is we take a proportion from a cash perspective that we actually pull out when we're doing our modelling, which obviously then affects all of the information that we send through. So there's a big difference between what we will obviously need council to approve as a budget. Obviously, that leads into contracts, and that allows the project managers to determine what they want to do. Behind the scenes, obviously, is then actually when we spend the cash and the timing of when that cash actually happens. So as part of our modelling, what we do is go in behind and make an assumption that actually, while you have a full capital program, so in this instance, the 377 from a cash flow perspective, which goes towards depreciation and interest and those sorts of operational expenses, which is exactly what we're rating for, I make an assumption that we're not going to spend all of that money.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. So maybe I rephrase the question. In the 21-22 year, what additional price cost escalations occurred in projects that we completed that we're now having to account for in the 22-23 year?
Oh, nobody can hear that, can they?
I can hear that. I'm just trying to understand the question.
Mayor Paula, maybe I could help. We do cover that point in the PX section as well, and we have got a note in there that covers that point.
Can we do that? And if you're not satisfied, and of course everything is, once we've been in PX, the major decisions come out into open anyway. Ewan, is that okay?
Yep, no, that's fine. There was a former councillor on this council that would every year would debate the merits of deferrals, and I don't know if he ever used the term, it could give an appearance of a pyramid scheme. We say one thing, we then defer, we borrow more to cover what we've spent, and then it just keeps going and going and going. So I'm just finally, what you're saying in this document is, look, we're deferring some projects, that gives us more headroom. Then in this year, in the 22-23 year, we're going to have to defer some of those projects to the next year to make up from the ones that we've had to defer from this current year. And it just keeps going, right? This is our modus operandi. And maybe I'll ask another question. Has there been any year in the last 30 years that we've actually completed the contracts and the work we have said we were going to do? Just 1 year in 30.
So can I just sort of address that first? But so there's an assumption that things will get deferred for a range of reasons. Just in terms of cause and effect, things aren't deferred in order to meet the financial strategy. The financial strategy is a result of the assumption that things will be deferred, I think is probably the better way to phrase it.
Okay, so in terms of in the last 30 years, well, let's make it easy while you guys have been there. For the last 10, have we ever had a year that we haven't deferred projects?
So Councillor Wilson, I've been here 10. I haven't been here 30, so I can answer the 10-year, but not the 30-year one. Look, in my 10 years, deferrals have always been part of the equation, but I will make the point, and I've made this point to councillors on a number of times, it does not mean that we're not completing the projects. Our track record on completing the projects we set out to do is extremely good. It's a cash flow in how we complete those projects.
Thank you.
It's very rare that we don't complete projects.
All right, Chris. So thank you. One more question. Can you, in your 10 years, tell me, are there any projects that we've rated for that we haven't completed?
Oh, that's a big
I'm sure there are some projects that, for some reasons, council have decided not to proceed. So generally, if we don't proceed with the project, that would be a council decision. But in my experience, the bulk of the projects that we agree to do, we complete.
And if I can just chip in there, one of the things that might be useful is to remember that when we calculate our rates, they don't exactly align with our costs for that year. They align for two components. They are about the costs, so we try and focus on balancing the books, right? But they're also, the purpose is to create a surplus, and that surplus then repays debt. So, and I know Councillor Rob will talk about that in the Finance Committee. So again, our rate percentage, average rate increase has two functions. One is to repay for the costs of running council, as well as creating a surplus, which then operates as a debt repayment to reduce our debts.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Naidu-Rowe.
Thank you. To help with my understanding, on table 5, the 90.6 in deferrals, I get it spread out over the next 3 years. At which point do we account for inflation on those costs, on those deferrals?
Might need Tracy or David to help with that.
So, Tracy, I think those deferrals are escalated numbers using our assumptions in the 10-year plan.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't quite get that.
So, Tracy, do you want to take that one?
So they go into the model, and then whatever year they are and get picked up with the inflation rates.
So is it like a blanket inflation percentage on every project that happens for that year?
It depends on where those particular projects are at, because some of them might already be contracted in. So some of them we might already have some, and which in most cases, some of them are already doing that. So it kind of depends. They're done individually, if that helps. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And just to ask on one of the actual projects on 212, I see the Bowman Horsham Downs upgrade as part of that deferral list. What was the primary reason for that one?
Chris here again. Look, I can give councillors an update on Borman Road in the PX section. There's just some emerging funding issues, which are positive, not negative. But it's just the timing issue and getting that project to the start line and ready to go. So some of the delays have been about just engagement with Waka Kotahi to line up the funding.
Okay.
But I can cover that in the PX section.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Councillor Van Ooston.
Oh, thank you. Just following up from Councillor Kesh's question raised about the application of inflation on deferred projects. Chris, I've heard you talk before about other strategies that council can use alongside of making that allowance, and I guess some of that includes the contingency. But can you just remind us about what those other strategies might be?
Sure. Look, if I just come back with, as a simple explanation of the escalation, because this is probably really relevant to our PX discussion. So when we build a long-term plan, we always work in year $0. So all the dollars we work on are expressed in 2019, $20 in the case of this LTP, right? What were the costs at that point of time? We then make an inflation assumption, and for capital, that assumption was 3% every year. So 3% gets added to those figures, compounding every year. So that's how we budget. So I think the question you're asking, Councillor Maxine, was in the world where costs are going up, how do we mitigate against those costs? So we've had some discussions about the impact of materials and the ever increasing price of materials. So we are, on our current contracts, we're seriously looking at that in partnership with our suppliers or our contractors, and looking at advanced purchase of materials. So there's never a better time to buy materials than now, rather than leave them for later because the costs are going up. So can we have some contractual arrangements with the contractor where we pay for the materials, 12 months ahead, we use them and stockpile them on site, so we're getting them at better prices. So those are the types of things that are going on now. Interactive tendering with contractors, so we just can understand better what the price cost drivers are for them and how we can change our contract just to help them with cash flow, help them manage some of those increases. So I think that's the heart of your question, and materials is probably a big focus at the moment. The other one is in a world where Omicron world, where we're having disruptions because of absenteeism. It's contract period. Like, can we be more relaxed on the time period to build projects, so they're not under pressure and hence cost? So can they plan to deliver them over a longer time period, and what's the optimum time period? So look, I'll stop there, but there's a whole range of really technical and contractual discussions that we're having with our suppliers on these big contracts to mitigate some of the impacts.
And can we also review scope through that process as well?
Yeah, so look, a scope is probably a bigger issue for us than cost increases. We're charged with estimating what the cost of a project will be well in advance of the project starting, and we have to make scope assumptions, and scope creep with changing standards and other things, sometimes outside our control, sometimes in our control, are probably more relevant to the cost of the project than price escalations. So we try and manage that all the time through value engineering is a term you probably hear us using a lot, but a lot of scope decisions come through council decisions as well, in terms of walking and cycling is a big one, and changing standards there. So the standards are increasing nationally on that, not just through our decisions at council, and they're changing rapidly compared to when we put budgets together. Another really big one for us is the national policy statement on fresh water and what we have to do there. So we're probably starting to get into some of the escalation discussions that we're going to have in the next session.
Thank you. Thanks, Paula.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Pretty robust questioning through that, which is good. Julie, where are we at now? We're going to go into PX shortly.
Yes, we are. That's the next.
So I would suggest we take a 10-minute leg stretch and grab yourself, because I don't think the next topic will necessarily be a short one. So we're at 10:24. So we come back at 20 to 11.
Move into public excluded and then go to break, just so that we have the time to update.
Absolutely, we will do that. But before I do that, Amy, I just want to make a couple of things, because I know there'll be media and public potentially tuning in, just to let them know what we're doing. So we will go and have a tea break. We'll be back at 20 to 11. We'll be in public excluded for, I imagine, at least half an hour, but hard to measure entirely. Who's laughing?
Me.
Oh, good. All right, we'll be in public excluded for at least 4 hours. No, but seriously, we'll keep in touch as best we can as to when we come back into open. Colleagues, will move. I'll move that we move into. Thanks, Jeff.